Two brothers tried to bring their mother back from death. They failed. One lost his body, the other lost limbs trying to save him, and they spent years searching for redemption. But what if that night in their basement went differently? What if, instead of learning humility from their mistake, they learned something else entirely? What if the Elric brothers looked at the law of equivalent exchange and decided the price was unfair? Today, we're exploring the darkest timeline where Edward and Alphonse don't search for the Philosopher's Stone to restore themselves, but to remake the world in their image. Before we break the brothers, we need to understand what held them together. Edward and Alphonse Elric represent one of anime's most powerful depictions of unconditional brotherly love. After their mother Trisha died from illness and their father Van Hohenheim abandoned them, these boys had only each other. That bond drove them to study alchemy obsessively, training under the brutal Izumi Curtis, all to perform the ultimate taboo, human transmutation. The night they tried to resurrect their mother, Edward lost his left leg to truth itself. In that moment, witnessing his brother's entire body being dragged through the gate, Edward made a split-second decision that defined his character. He sacrificed his right arm to bind Alphonse's soul to a nearby suit of armor. Most people would have given up. Most would have accepted their tragedy and moved on. But the Elrics spent the next several years searching for the Philosopher's Stone to undo their mistakes. That search made them heroes. They exposed corruption, saved lives, and ultimately helped defeat Father's plan to sacrifice the entire nation of Amestris. But heroism was never guaranteed. It was a choice they made every single day, often against temptation.
Edward Elric is brilliant. At age 12, he became the youngest state alchemist in history. He can perform transmutation without circles after seeing truth, something only a handful of alchemists can do. He adapts techniques instantly, incorporating Scar's destruction alchemy, Armstrong's stone manipulation, even Greed's carbon hardening after seeing them once. That genius, turned toward villainy, becomes terrifying. The shift wouldn't be sudden. It would start small. Maybe Edward stops trying to avoid collateral damage. Maybe he starts seeing people as variables in an equation rather than lives worth protecting. Alphonse notices first, his brother's methods getting harsher, his moral lines blurring. But Al has always followed Edward's lead, and after years bound to armor, unable to eat, sleep, or feel anything, he's desperate too. The turning point comes when they discover Dr. Marco's research. In the original timeline, learning that Philosopher's Stones are made from human souls horrified them so deeply that they refused to use one, even to restore their bodies. But in this darker timeline, Edward's perspective has shifted. People die every day in pointless wars orchestrated by Father. Innocent Ishvalans were massacred to create stones. If the system already uses human sacrifice as currency, why shouldn't he? Here's where it gets truly dark. Edward knows the exact transmutation circle needed to create a Philosopher's Stone. He's seen the research, he understands the principle, and unlike Father, who engineered centuries of war to place deaths at specific geographic points, Edward can think smaller and more efficient. He doesn't need a nationwide transmutation circle. He just needs people. Amestris is full of them. Corrupt officials who enabled Father's plan, military officers who participated in the Ishvalan genocide, criminals condemned to death. Edward starts with those, people he can justify sacrificing. Each small stone he creates brings him one step closer to having enough power to restore Alphonse. But Philosopher's Stones run on human souls, requiring potentially dozens of lives per stone, depending on the power needed. The first time Edward creates a stone, Alphonse is horrified. They argue.
Al reminds him of their teacher Izumi's lessons about the sanctity of human life, but Edward counters with cold logic. Their mother is dead because they couldn't save her. Hughes is dead because they couldn't stop envy. The Ishvans died by the thousands. The world has already made its choice about the value of human life. They're just adapting to survive in it. Alphonse eventually agrees because his brother is all he has left. But something breaks inside him when he does.
With Philosopher's stones in hand, the Elric brothers become something unprecedented. Villains with the moral authority of victims. They target the corrupt first. Emestrian generals who ordered the Ishvalan massacre. Politicians who knew about Father's plan. Each death Edward justifies as justice, not murder. And he's not entirely wrong. These people have blood on their hands. But that's how it starts. Soon, Edward's definition of acceptable targets expands. Scientists who worked on human transmutation research, state alchemists who participated in the war, anyone connected to the military infrastructure that enabled Father. The body count rises, and with it, Edward's power grows. His alchemy evolves in terrifying ways. Remember, Edward adapts techniques after seeing them once. He's fought homunculi. He's seen Scar's destruction alchemy that bypasses physical durability by deconstructing matter at the molecular level. He's witnessed Kimbley's explosion alchemy. Combined with stones that let him ignore equivalent exchange, Edward becomes a walking natural disaster. Alphonse is his anchor, but even that's slipping. The armor that houses Al's soul can be modified, enhanced with alchemical upgrades that make him nearly indestructible. They become a perfect team, Edward with adaptable combat alchemy and strategic genius, Alphonse with a body that doesn't tire, doesn't bleed, doesn't feel pain. Roy Mustang confronts them first. He has to. Edward was once his subordinate, someone he mentored and respected. Seeing the Fullmetal alchemist become the thing he swore to stop breaks Mustang's heart. Their battle isn't just physical, it's ideological. Mustang argues that killing in the name of justice just perpetuates the cycle. Edward argues that the cycle can't be broken without destroying those who built it. The fight showcases how far Edward has fallen. Mustang's flame alchemy once seemed insurmountable, but Edward now has multiple Philosopher's stones and years of combat experience against stronger opponents. He predicts Mustang's attacks, reconstructs the ground to block flames, and when Mustang tries to overwhelm him with heat, Edward uses the moisture in the air to create barriers of steam and ice. But the truly devastating moment comes when Edward offers Mustang a choice. Join them in tearing down the corrupt system, or die defending it. Mustang refuses, and Edward doesn't hesitate. He doesn't kill him. That would be too merciful. Instead, he uses alchemy to sever the nerves in Mustang's hands, rendering him powerless in seconds. The flame alchemist becomes powerless in seconds. Ryza Hawkeye watches in horror as Edward leaves Mustang broken but alive, a message to anyone else who might oppose them. Word spreads of the Elric brothers' crusade. Some see them as terrorists, others view them as revolutionaries dismantling a government built on genocide and conspiracy. The truth is somewhere in between, which makes them more dangerous. They're not mindless killers. They're calculated, strategic, and their targets are often people the public wouldn't mourn. This is when Father notices. In the original timeline, Father viewed the Elrics as necessary sacrifices, alchemists who had opened the gate of truth and needed to be kept alive for his plan. But these Elrics are different. They're not searching for redemption, they're accumulating power. And unlike Scar, whose revenge was emotional and predictable, the Elrics are methodical. Father sends lust first.
She tries to manipulate Edward, playing on his desires, but Edward has seen through deception before. When lust extends her ultimate spear to kill him, Edward is ready. He studied homunculi regeneration extensively. He knows they're powered by Philosopher's stones that contain finite souls. So he doesn't try to kill her once. He kills her dozens of times in rapid succession, using destruction alchemy to disintegrate her body faster than she can regenerate, depleting her stone's power until she crumbles to dust. It's a message to Father. Your homunculi aren't untouchable anymore. The world has never seen alchemists like this. Edward and Alphonse don't just want the Philosopher's Stone for themselves, they want to reshape how alchemy works in Amestris entirely. Edward's unique ability to perform transmutation without circles came from seeing truth. He paid for that knowledge with his limbs. But what if that knowledge could be shared? In his darkest experiments, Edward theorizes that he could forcibly open others' gates of truth using Philosopher's Stones. It would require human sacrifice to provide the necessary energy, but it would create more circleless alchemists, an army of them, all loyal to his vision of a new Amestris. Alphonse questions if this makes them any different than Father, but Edward's justification is always the same. Father wanted to become God. Edward just wants to level the playing field. The turning point comes when they encounter their father, von Hohenheim. In the original timeline, Hohenheim and his sons reconciled, working together to stop Father. But in this timeline, Edward sees Hohenheim as the beginning of all their problems. If Hohenheim hadn't abandoned them, maybe their mother wouldn't have died. If Hohenheim had been honest about his immortality and Father's plan, maybe they could have avoided all of this. Their confrontation is brutal. Hohenheim is essentially a living Philosopher's Stone with over 500,000 souls inside him. But Edward has something Hohenheim doesn't: ruthlessness. He uses Alphonse's armor as a distraction while he transmutes the ground beneath Hohenheim into a binding circle designed specifically to disrupt the souls within his body. It's alchemy designed to cause maximum suffering, forcing Hohenheim's consciousness to fight with all the souls he carries. With Hohenheim incapacitated and Mustang crippled, the state military has no answer for the Elric brothers. They move towards Central, intent on confronting Father directly, but not to stop his plan, to take it over. Edward has figured out Father's nationwide transmutation circle. He knows the promised day is coming, and he's calculated that if he can replace Father as the center of that circle, he can claim the power for himself. It's insane. Father spent centuries preparing for this moment, gathering souls from Xerxes and setting up Amestris as one massive sacrifice. But Edward has always been unconventional. He doesn't need centuries. He has Philosopher's Stones, knowledge from truth, and Alphonse at his side. Most importantly, he has nothing left to lose. The battle with the remaining homunculi is apocalyptic. Pride tries to consume Alphonse's armor body, but Al has learned from watching his brother. He uses his own blood seal as a trap, making Pride's shadows part of his own transmutation circle. When Pride retreats, he's pulled part of Al's soul with him, creating a connection. Now they're linked. Pride can see through Al's eyes, but Al can also manipulate Pride's shadows. It's a symbiotic possession, and it horrifies everyone watching. Edward faces wrath. King Bradley himself, the homunculus who can see the world in absolute clarity. Bradley is fast, experienced, and has the ultimate eye that predicts movements. But Edward doesn't need to outfight him, he just needs to outthink him. Using stones, Edward transmutes the entire battlefield into a maze of shifting walls and floors, forcing Bradley to fight blind in an environment that changes faster than even his eye can adapt to. The promised day arrives. Father emerges, expecting his sacrifices to be present but helpless. Instead, he finds Edward and Alphonse waiting for him, backed by stones containing thousands of souls and ready to hijack his transmutation circle. The clash between them tears Central apart. Father has the advantage initially. He's been planning this for centuries, and his power dwarfs anything the brothers have accumulated. But Edward has studied Father's techniques through fighting his homunculi, and more importantly, Edward is willing to do things Father isn't. When Father tries to absorb God from the gate of truth, Edward interferes with his own transmutation, creating a three-way battle between Father, Edward, and truth itself. The result is catastrophic. The nationwide transmutation activates, but corrupted. Instead of channeling all of Amestris's souls into Father, the circle fragments, distributing power chaotically. Millions die instantly as the circle activates, but the energy doesn't flow to any single person. It disperses into the ground, the air, the very fabric of Amestris itself. Edward survives, but barely. Alphonse's armor is nearly destroyed, his blood seal damaged, and they're left standing in the ruins of Central, surrounded by the corpses of countless civilians caught in their war against Father. Edward got his revenge against the system. He stopped Father's plan, but the cost was everything.
In the aftermath, Amestris is broken. The military has collapsed. Most of the country's leadership is dead, killed either by the Elric's crusade or Father's transmutation. Edward and Alphonse have the power they sought, multiple philosopher stones and knowledge beyond any alchemist in history, but they have nowhere to use it. The nation they wanted to remake no longer exists in any meaningful form. Survivors call them demons, the brothers who destroyed Amestris. Historians will debate whether they were freedom fighters or terrorists. The truth is they were both, and neither. They were two traumatized children who made one bad choice after another, each one justified by the previous tragedy, until they couldn't see the line between justice and revenge anymore. Alphonse finally regains his body, using the souls released from Father's dying form to perform the transmutation. But when he looks at Edward, he sees a stranger. His brother has become so focused on equivalent exchange, on paying every debt and evening every score, that he forgot what they were fighting for in the first place. They wanted their bodies back to live normal lives. Instead, they destroyed any chance of normalcy for millions. But there's another version of this story, one slightly less apocalyptic. What if the Elric's descent into villainy happened slower? What if instead of becoming terrorists, they became tyrants? In this timeline, after gathering enough power to restore themselves, Edward and Alphonse don't stop. They use their knowledge and philosopher stones to stage a coup, overthrowing King Bradley and installing themselves as Amestris's new leaders. Their justification is sound. The previous government was run by homunculi planning genocide. They're heroes who saved the nation. But absolute power corrupts absolutely. Edward begins implementing radical reforms. He centralizes all alchemical research under his control. He conscripts talented alchemists into mandatory service. He argues it's for the greater good, preventing another father-like conspiracy. But it's also about control. Edward's trauma from losing his mother, losing his body, watching Hughes die, all of it manifests as an obsessive need to prevent loss through absolute oversight. Alphonse becomes his enforcer, still in his armor body by choice now. It's stronger, more durable than flesh. He leads a new military loyal only to the brothers. Anyone who questions their rule is branded a threat to national security. Dissidents disappear. Resistance movements are crushed. This version of the Elrics creates something tragically ironic. They became exactly what they fought against, leaders who use human life as a resource to maintain power. They don't call it human sacrifice, they call it conscription or justice or progress, but the result is the same: people dying to fuel their vision of a better world. The most heartbreaking element is that Edward genuinely believes he's making things better. He points to infrastructure improvements, medical advances using alchemy, the lack of pointless wars, and he's not entirely wrong. Under the Elric's rule, Amestris becomes more technologically advanced and internally stable, but its stability built on fear and enforced through alchemical supremacy. Winry Rockwell, Edward's childhood friend and love interest, becomes the symbol of what they lost. She refuses to make automail for their regime, seeing it as enabling tyranny. When Edward visits her, trying to explain that everything he's done was to create a world where no one else would suffer like they did, she just asks him one question: how many mothers have died because of your revolution? Edward doesn't answer. He can't, because somewhere deep down, he knows the truth. They became villains the moment they stopped counting the cost in human terms and started thinking of people as equivalent exchange calculations. The Elric brothers became heroes because they never lost sight of what they were fighting for: each other and the innocent people caught in Father's plan. But they were always one bad day away from this darkness. Their genius, their power, their intimate understanding of alchemy's most forbidden secrets, all of it could have been turned towards destruction instead of redemption. What separates a hero from a villain isn't power or even intentions, it's the choices they make when facing impossible situations. Edward and Alphonse chose to accept their mistakes and work within the system to change it gradually. But in another timeline, in darker circumstances, they could have chosen differently. And that's what makes them such compelling characters: the knowledge that their heroism was never inevitable. It was earned through conscious decisions made over and over again to choose mercy over vengeance. The Elric brothers' story is ultimately about redemption, but redemption only matters if damnation was possible. And make no mistake, it was always possible. This darker timeline exists as a reminder that heroes aren't born. They're made through choices, often painful ones, to be better than the world that hurt them. In alchemy, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. But in storytelling, one choice can rewrite entire universes. If this twisted timeline got your mind racing, smash that subscribe button, because we're just getting started. Next week, we're diving into another reality-breaking what-if that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about your favorite anime. What's your take on villain Elric brothers? Could they have held power, or would they have self-destructed? Drop your darkest theories in the comments. And remember, equivalent exchange doesn't just apply to alchemy. You give us a subscription, we'll give you theories that'll keep you up at night. Fair trade, right? See you in the next paradox.